record. So thank you guys for being here today. Again, as I said, it's just nice to be back on AFAR Live. We have the most incredible group of panelists, which I'll get to, but I wanted to first say a few words about our topic, which is Sustainability Unpacked, which came from our co-founder, Joe Diaz, who's on this call. One attendee sent in a comment before today's session that said, I would really like to focus on the how we take action. We continue to talk about this topic, but we need to talk about the next steps of how. And I so agree with that. And that's my goal for this conversation. For a long time, especially in luxury travel, there's been a narrative that is glorified more, right? Like how many bottles in the bathroom can you bring home, and how big is the convention center, and flying in cheeses from France or Austria for the $800 dinner. And that conversation has completely changed. And it did before COVID, but definitely now. But it doesn't mean we can't have fun, right? So if it's not good for the consumer, it's not good for the company. It's not an either or, because if you're a sustainable traveler, that's the best kind of travel. So, and I'm coming at this probably like a lot of you on this call, someone who cares a lot, purpose-driven a lot of the time, deep curiosity, obsessive researcher, but not an expert, which is why we have these wonderful people on the call. So I usually introduce myself, but I'd love to just let you guys introduce yourselves for quickly before we get started. Can I start with Randy, it's 2 a.m. for Randy. So
it's only 1 a.m.
Oh, 1 a.m. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot better.
So I'm in Korea. That's why it's 1 a.m. everyone. So Randy Durband, GSTC CEO. I've been in travel and tourism. Next month will be 40 years. I spent more than a quarter century with tour operators, more than 20 years at Tauk Tours, left as an executive vice president, wore a million hats there. And then I was the president of Travcoa, luxury tour operator. So my world is knowing outbound tour operators. During that time, I was on the board of directors of the European Tour Operators Association. I was involved in PATA, Pacific Asian Travel Association, USTOA, NTA, CTC. And I've operated travel on all 7 continents. And then I had a second career about a dozen years ago. I decided to take my knowledge of the business of travel and my passion for sustainability. And now I make less money, work just as long hours, and just as much stress to try to make the world a better place. So here I am.
We appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anita.
Thank you very much. My name is Anita Mendiratta. I am very proud to be a tourism and development practitioner, author, diplomat, and an on-air presence. I run my own little business called Anita Mendiratta and Associates. I'm London-based, so I'm relatively near many of our people around that are on today. And I've been working in the industry for about 25 years, professionally, and living across all continents. Alongside, I'm very blessed to be the special advisor of the Secretary General of the UNWTO, who sends his regards. He knows that we are on this session today. And Annie, he's very grateful that we're taking the time to pause and really unpack a word that has become in so many ways overused, overtraded, and understood, if we can say. Most recently, the firm has been working nonstop in terms of helping businesses, leaders, government, and corporations trying to understand how do they actually work through the short, medium, and long-term decision making around COVID-19 and its impact. So that's been I was going to say 9 to 5, but it's been more 24/7, 365. On top of that, I'm very blessed to be on boards from Saudi Arabia to South Africa, and which allows me to compliment Shannon, who's about to introduce herself, on a recent international award that she was given by the WTTC this week for her leadership in sustainability. So Shannon, as your community members, I'm allowed to bust you and call it out. And I'm really grateful for this time, Annie, and I'm really grateful that AFAR is having this conversation now, because it is time to turn rhetoric and philosophy into action. So thank you.
Thank you. Shannon, award winner.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anita. So my name is Shannon Guihan, and I'm the Chief TreadRight and Sustainability Officer for the Travel Corporation. That is a family of 40+ brands, including Kentucky, Trafalgar, Red Carnation, Hotels, Uniworld, and so on. I started in the industry when I was 16, so we can guess at the math. And I've never left. I've grown up as a guide, sea kayak guide, bike guide, I have worked with tour operators globally. Some are on the call. I see Kathy's here. So I started and grew up at Butterfield and Robinson for a wee while and then moved around to other tour operators. However, my master's is in tourism and environmental management. And I grew up in a place in East Coast Canada, Newfoundland, where there was a real shift from fisheries over to tourism. In fact, it was a mad dash. So I watched tourism happen without any planning. And that's really why my focus has remained in sustainable tourism development. I'm a former destination consultant, and now I set the strategic approach to sustainability for the Travel Corporation, in addition to overseeing our philanthropic efforts at the TreadRight Foundation.
Wow, amazing. Thank you guys. And Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself and then kind of open us up with how we got to this conversation and why is sustainability so confusing.
Yeah, thanks, Annie, and really excited to spend this time today. I'm Joe Diaz, co-founder of AFAR, and and I think the fact that we're even getting to have this conversation means that we're able to pull ourselves up a little bit from the, traumatic and incredible 15, 16 months that we've had and that we've experienced in this industry. So the fact that we're able to kind of look at the long term again and begin thinking about, those most important things is something that I'm just grateful for. So yeah, how did we get here? I think, part of it is just thinking about reflecting on our last year. Travel essentially shut down for us in the middle of March. And a lot of the questions were around, what do we do? And it was everybody trying to figure out what to do. Annie, just so proud of you for realizing that the industry just needed to come together. Everybody was so isolated and confused and uncertain. And so just even having the idea to have these AFAR lives where you could get the industry together to talk about topics that are important to the industry, important to us, and create a sense of community has been phenomenal. So thank you for creating this forum for us. As I, think about the last year, we went from, I feel like as an industry, really excited about where we were going to completely stopping. And so the tack that I think AFAR took was, instead of thinking about what can we do, a lot of time went into thinking about what can we be? Who do we want to be? How do we want to feel? What's the kind of company that we want to create coming out of this? And we saw all of these insane, tragic things happening. I mean, from the George Floyd episode and everything that we've seen with racial injustice and inequality, to just the impact that this virus has had, not only on all of us, but especially those that are, poor, disenfranchised, and disadvantaged. And so that was something that we really took to heart. We saw the fact that governments started to talk about, and you're hearing about it now more, just the regulation that could be coming down the pike because of the impact that climate change is having on all of us. We saw threats like travel shaming and how that's going to continue to become even more real, especially as issues around sustainability and climate change become sharper. So we started asking ourselves the question, like, how can we become better stewards? I know that's a question that a lot of folks listening in today want to know, like, how, not only what, but how do we do this? And so, the steps that I think we started to take was realizing, one, we need to do more. AFAR has always been about using travel as a way to transform the self, using an open mind and a curious spirit to really sit at the proverbial kitchen table with people and use travel as a way to transform who we are. But we had to ask our questions, how do we become better stewards? How can we use that transformation to go further? And the answers that we kept coming up with is we need to do a better job leveraging that transformation to take care of the planet and to take care of the communities in which we're living, working, and playing. So first thing we did was we decided we want to become a public benefit company. So AFAR this year incorporated as a public benefit company, responsible not just to our shareholders, but to all stakeholders, where we're going to be measuring the impact of our work and reporting that to all stakeholders. We evolved our mission and our vision to not only incorporate the ideas around transformation to the self, but how do we make an impact? How can our travelers continue to make an impact in this world? We evolved our edit calendar to really align around our mission and vision. We started working with DEI consultants and experts because we took a look around our house and we said, we need to do a better job at diversity, especially with our management team, and create more opportunities for diverse voices to come in and be representative. That's going to impact how we hire. That's kind of the exciting part now, is we get to start hiring again. And so being able to do that with a fresh lens, an evolved lens, is exciting to us. And we started reaching out to experts, reaching out to folks like the GSTC. We saw the incredible work that Randy and Roy and their teams are doing. We said, we need to be able to help travelers understand this in better ways. So, Randy and myself and Greg, and Roy, we've been on calls every week for basically the last year, really talking about this. We created an incredible advisory board that is going to help even more. And, that's really the first house that we did, is getting our own house in order so that we can contribute in a powerful way. And I do think, sustainability is confusing. I want us to get into that. And that's, I think with AFAR, it always starts with a mindset. We've been curious about the world, open-minded, willing to get outside our comfort zone a little bit and stretch ourselves. Now we really realize that, this mindset's about stewardship. And it's similar to the Patek Philippe advertisement that we all see. You don't own the watch, you merely take care of it for the next generation.
Yeah.
And so that's really where we're headed.
Thank you, Joe. That's brilliant branding by Patek Philippe, by the way. And I think, as all of us at AFAR have seen that firsthand, because we also had a little more time this year, right? I mean, a lot of us have been really busy, but all of us on this call have talked about, we've had time this year to focus on this. So I want to start by asking, so talking about my bubble tea with the plastic straw, plastic straws have been something that have kind of taken over the sustainability conversation in a way, because, it's been good branding, right? We all know that they're bad, but we also know that their significance is overweighted. So I wanted to ask each of you to kind of dive right into the specifics. What is your plastic straw? What is the thing that you wish that, would get that type of branding and significance that would actually make a real difference? I can start with Anita.
Brilliant. I like how we're all avoiding eye contact.
It's a big question, I know, but I want to get right into it.
My plastic straw, aside from the fact that I don't fundamentally believe that we need straws to begin with, so whether it's plastic, pasta, bamboo, or paper, I don't think we need straws. Why is sustainability a choice? That's what I struggle with. Fundamentally, why is it a choice? Because I loved what you were saying, Joe, about needing to really stand up and take a position on this. Because my argument is always, it's not what should we do? How can we not? That's what I struggle with. So if I can, that's my straw.
Yeah, and I love, you told me on our call too, you're like, well, what's the opposite of a sustainable company? Not in business, right? That's like, yeah. Shannon, what about you?
Mine's not terribly dissimilar, sadly. So I took a look at the questions you sent through this morning. Useful, thank you. And what frustrates me is how we continue to say, well, what makes a sustainable traveler versus just anybody. So I don't know why we need to differentiate the way in which we behave at home and in our own communities from the way in which we do so when we travel. And I would really like us to get beyond that, because what I think it does is it prevents a barrier for people to recognize that sustainable tourism or sustainable travel is only complicated because of that word that makes people's eyes glaze over. It's really, it ought not be that much more complicated.
Yeah, agreed. And Randy, what about you?
Well, Anita took mine as well, but let me take a different tack then. Short stay flights bother me. Just before the pandemic, we saw globally the flight shame movement really growing. It came out of the Nordic countries and trickled down south through Europe, and it was jumping oceans to other developed countries. I think that's a real risk to the entire travel industry, is flight shame and the carbon emissions of aviation. It's our Achilles heel. And everybody in the whole industry needs to take that bloody seriously, because destinations, hotels, tour operators, everybody, we're still largely tied to aviation. And if we're going to get at that, we can't have a mistake like in the US, the Black Lives Matter movement moved to defunding police. What an incredible oversimplification that damaged its own cause. You can talk about police reform, but defunding. So to me, flight shame has the potential also to go in this radically wrong direction, where there'll be a pushback against it and say, these crazy hippies don't want us to fly at all. So my plastic straw is flights that are for longer stays. Business travel to go for one meeting, no, that's got to go. Leisure trip for one little tiny short weekend, no, they got to go. We have to amortize that carbon with more fun, more business, whatever. And so what, airlines don't want to hear me say this, but we have to have less volume and, longer stays, more authentic stays on leisure travel. Business and leisure, you can't separate them anyway. People after a conference, after a meeting, they suddenly turn to a leisure traveler. So we don't have to separate them as much. So that's my plastic straw, length of stay.
Well,
amortize the flight.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about that, of course, on the edit side too, right? Longer stays and weeks. I don't want to go anywhere anymore for 2 days, right? Even living in Europe. So, and Randy, I would love you to kind of tell us, you're considered, the GSTC is considered to be the gold level standard in the industry for ratings. Can you just give an overview of that, why you're considered the gold standard?
Well, because nobody can touch us in terms of our inclusivity of creating our standards and revising them. We follow the ISEAL Alliance Standard Setting Code, which is a whole rule of public consultation. So we were created in 2007 by UNEP and UNWTO. They had gotten together in 2005 to give us the one sentence definition of sustainable tourism that still stands up today. And then they said, we need a longer definition. So they created us. So we're not in the UN system. We're a nonprofit. UN Foundation set us up as a USA 501c3 nonprofit. So we're distinct from the UN system, but our process of developing our standards and revising them cannot be touched in terms of inclusivity. So when people really look at that, they say, okay, we have in our directory more than 180 standards for hotels and sustainability alone, but many of them are written by one person or a committee of 3 or whatever. Nothing comes close to ours in terms of, again, a global process. It's inclusive. Thousands of calls go out for input from public sector, private sector, academia, NGOs. Anybody on this call can go into our website and sign up for future consultations. So that's why we've condensed massive input from a highly inclusive group, including disadvantaged people. We make an effort to go beyond the digital divide to get input. So nothing can touch that.
Annie, I just want to comment on that, because I know when Greg and I were thinking about, the roadmap that we wanted to follow, we saw there was so much confusion out there, lots of different standards, lots of different types of approaches. Over 250 certifications within travel. It's mind-blowing and mind-numbing. And then we came across the criteria, the GSTC criteria for hotels, for tour operators, and for destinations. And they really opened our mind to the breadth of what sustainability really means. And I think that's my plastic straw, is that I think when we, use the word sustainability, most of us run to this idea of green, you know, of eco, of just focusing on the environment. And those things that I brought up earlier, those observations, those things that are happening around us in our world, all of those play a role in sustainability. If we continue to have, you know, police rip people of color out of their cars and execute them in front of cameras, I'm sorry, you're not going to live in a sustainable world. That community will not sustain itself. So I think it's our opportunity and our challenge to really help customers, purchasers of travel advisors, understand that sustainability covers such a breadth, you know, from not only taking care of the planet, but to taking care of the communities, taking care of your employees. And so I just think GSTC has done a really phenomenal job of helping to create a roadmap for all of us to follow there.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, I think in the industry, we're finally wrapping our heads around that it is more than environmental, right? But I think on the consumer level, we haven't, right? So I think, you know, making sure the environmental, economic, social, all of those aspects are how we're selling and talking to consumers of travel, like you said.
Yeah.
So,
Can I just quickly add something there?
yeah, please.
So people have said to me in the last year and a half, why don't you put health safety in the criteria? Why don't you put dignity, equity, inclusiveness in the criteria? And it's like, ding, 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 they're all there. It's all there. Just read them. Social elements are in the criteria. Cultural elements. We followed that 2005 UNEP and UNWTO definition and use that as our platform to have 4 pillars of sustainability. It's all there, a holistic approach.
Mm.
Annie, can I just jump in for a second on this? Because I love the fact that Randy's on this call, and I was digging into AFAR before and getting prepared for here and looking at your principle of helping travelers get deeper and richer and more fulfilling in their experiences of travel. And Randy suddenly said something really important. And one thing I love about the fact that, again, you're stopping and having an hour spent talking about what is sustainability. And Joe said rightly, spiritual sustainability is part of how we create a better future. It's not just economic, social, cultural, environmental. It's ethical sustainability. You're absolutely right. I just want to rewind those slightly, because if there's one thing Mother Nature has taught us this last year by grounding us, and that's 4 billion travelers by air and 16,000 commercial flights at the peak of the pandemic, it's the importance of aviation. And I want to go back to something Randy said. We cannot stop aviation. Our issue is not addiction to aviation. Our issue is addiction to carbon emissions. That's the difference. Because if we stop aviation, it's travel and it's trade. So if we want to have avocados on our dinner tables in London in December, we need to recognize that. The important thing is that the aviation industry, that's 60+ million jobs if we ground those flights. So I've always, with this whole thing about flight shaming, it's always been my, especially as a diplomat, it's been my Achilles heel, because we need to separate the two. Without aviation, we are going to economically, socially, culturally, and environmentally do damage. If we don't invest, which the aviation industry is doing heavily, into green investments around carbon emissions and replacement, then we're in trouble. And that's why they've made commitments towards 2030 and 2050. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that when we look at developing the future of tourism in a way that is genuinely sustainable, a critical part of that is making sure that significant investment goes into sustainable aviation. Because if you look at island states around the world, if you look at destinations, they don't exist without aviation. So aviation is our primary artery. Destinations around the world are all opening up their borders, creating vaccination certificates. But until the flights are reopened, travelers can't get there. That's just the reality. So I just want to make sure that we don't make aviation a part of the problem. It's part of the solution. It's the emissions that are the problem. So I just wanted to seed that.
Definitely. And that's actually a great, I wanted to throw it to Shannon now, because it reminds me that you know, the Travel Corporation, you have 42 brands underneath you, and you announced last week that you're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. But as part of that, you know, as Anita said, with the carbon emissions and the airlines, you've invested in 2 carbon removal projects. Can you talk about that and why you're investing in that technology, which is so important?
Yeah, sure. There's 2 things I just wanted to add to what Anita was just saying, because I wholeheartedly agree. And you know, there's a couple questions that I saw come through. I think the trouble is with sustainability and the consumer is they think a very tactical approach. So they think, I'll avoid my straw and I'm doing my thing. But I think that's dangerous, because what we need is a full systems approach to systemic transitions. So were we not to see and encourage and be encouraged by aviation transitioning to sustainable aviation fuel and other technologies that are out there, you know, that's doing everybody a great disservice. So I think it's just important not to hone in on one soapbox, if you will, but look at what needs to happen within the system that we all live in.
Yes,
I think that's critical. So with respect to your question, though, the carbon removal projects that we've announced. So we put out last week a climate action plan. It's a 5-point plan that addresses the way in which we will reduce as we transition towards a low carbon economy. And I say we by all of our multiple offices, all of our red carnation hotels, all of our ships. So we are a big machine. So we have been measuring our carbon footprint for quite a long time, our owned assets and that on our trips through tools that we have built. We are working on reduction. So all red carnation hotels property will be run on renewables by the close of the year. We have our wonderful Kidra in Botswana that's just launched, and we run at about, I believe it's 85% solar. So we're employing a tactical approach to reducing our carbon emissions. We are employing some offsets. However, offsets are an interim solution for us, because offsets are effectively paying somebody else to avoid the emissions that you're going to employ. So it's a topic of great debate. Certainly, everyone has very heated opinions on what to do. My opinion is that if we do nothing, then we're in the wrong. So let's start there. However, carbon removal is really interesting. There's multiple new technologies coming up, and it effectively pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and stores it permanently, which to me is very exciting, because the reality is the world is not just going to stop producing the amount of carbon that we've all grown accustomed to in order to support our lives, rightly or wrongly. So by removing it from the atmosphere, we have a real opportunity. The 2 projects we're supporting are US-based not-for-profits. One is Project Vesta, and their pilot project is in Hawaii. And they're using olivine, which is a volcanic mineral. They're expediting the natural process of the waves to crush the olivine, and they're spreading it on the seashell. It then enhances the ocean's capability to capture carbon, which it does so permanently. So they reckon if their solution is successful, and it's based on 30 years of science, were they to put it on 2% of the sea floor, that would pull the entirety of carbon emissions per annum out of the atmosphere. So that's, even if they're a little bit right, and I'm confident that they're quite right, it's really exciting. The other project is Green Wave, based out of the Northeast, run by a fellow Newfoundlander, interestingly. And it's kelp farming, and they're using kelp from their farms to enhance the soil capability, or the ability of regenerative farms to sequester carbon without the harmful nitrous oxide byproduct.
Wow.
I know it's
a lot happening. And what's the water bottle you told me about, by the way, when we talked, that is
here? Yeah, Lark.
Everyone should know about this.
Lark uses UV to filter your water. So I, just before COVID hit, was sort of, they're not cheap. So I was purchasing them for the family so we could be fine when my kids always seem to need water somewhere. But
yeah. LARQ. Amazing. Well, Randy, I wanted to ask you specifically about the supply chain, which of course, Shannon, all of us on this call are involved with, but it can actually be a significant part of the cultural experience as well. But what can we be doing and thinking about when it comes to making the supply chain for travel companies more sustainable?
Well, I think the supply chain is extremely important, because travelers market research shows globally that travelers are more and more concerned with sustainability, but yet at point of purchase, they hardly act, because I think, let's face it, when we all buy travel, we're thinking price, we're thinking what's kind of the product, the destination, the hotel that speaks to my self-identity. So, and then just, what Joe was talking about, the breadth and the holistic element of sustainability, it's hard to balance all these things. I really think the traveler is counting on the businesses to do the right things. Businesses don't want regulations, so I think business just needs to get a whole lot better. And I think that supply chain development is really a key piece to it, because when you're contracting the services of other people, a tour operator, a corporate travel division, when they're contracting hotels there's a lot they can do to operate more sustainably. The land transport provider can choose hybrids and electric vehicles, or the cost of EVs have come down dramatically. And so, we need those kinds of targets, internally in a business to say 4 years from now, we're only going to use clean energy buses. And if you put the word out to your supply chain that, we're going to give you time to transition, it'd be unreasonable to give an expectation to say, we need this immediately. You work with your suppliers, you set meaningful targets, and you give preferential contracting in the bidding process to say, we want our land transport greener, we want our hotels greener, and we had the power to make everything on land far greener. As challenging as the aviation thing is, and I wish we could get to cleaner energy aviation sooner. We'll get there, but we're not going to get there as quick as any of us would like. But we're there. The technology supports everything we do on land to be clean and green today, but we got to push it. And again, I just don't think we can put the onus on the traveler, because I'm happy to see that more travelers are enlightened now than a year and a half ago before the pandemic. But is the mass of travelers, is the mass of society suddenly that enlightened?
Right.
I rather doubt it. And I think that businesses have to just get very serious. It's not recycling in their own office. It's who are they contracting with? And this is where, we've had long discussions, Joe and Greg and I, about that supply chain development, because we've got a very rigorous system in place now that TUI Group, one of the largest travel companies in the world, is using. Royal Caribbean at the ports and destinations, they're doing preferential contracting to land operators at the ports based on, and MSC Cruises has followed that, and the whole CLIA movement. We're kind of doing that at ports, all aside from whatever other issues exist in ships. The issue here is that in supply chain development, you set targets, you can do it. Outbound tour operators could set targets. We're going to have X number of hotels properly certified, not just certified, well certified.
Right.
Because that's a whole issue too, of just the quality of certification is quite uneven, and that's an area we're working on. So yeah, supply chain development, I think, is huge.
And I'm going to ask you all at the very end for your favorite resources, but now I did want to mention there's a TED Talk. Jason Clay, is that his name? If you search.
Yeah, Clay, C-L-A-Y.
Yeah, this talked about just how, how to, it's just fascinating. I think 18 and a half minutes, well worth your time, that talks about the supply chain in a very impactful way.
Annie, can I
I turned Annie onto it because we're doing that in tourism, what WWF has done successfully for a quarter of a century in other sectors. And the Jason Clay discussion is how they do it on biodiversity, but it lays out their model.
Yes.
And we're applying that. And that's what many of you know, WWF, especially USA and Germany chapters, are working on these issues and working with us on those issues.
Yeah, Anita.
Just a quick thing, if I can ask, because it's building on what Randy said, which is so important, and it goes to a word that Shannon used earlier, which was systemic. Because what we found as well is that there are interdependencies that must be recognized now. With governments opening up to domestic tourism and regional, it's not about the tourists, it's about supply chains. Because when you open up tourism, they're all the direct and indirect supply chains. And sorry, Shannon, I'm going to potentially make you go a little bit pink. Two of the people that have really touched my heart in this last, even before COVID, one of the dangers of working in sustainability is people don't like leaving not just a carbon footprint, but an ego footprint. And Shannon and Brett Tolman suffer from that very badly because they take no credit for what they've done. But what's been amazing is that tourism was growing so quickly. The concept of sustainability was a choice. We'll get to it when we have time. We're growing, exactly as Randy was saying about cruise, et cetera. And Mother Nature is like, okay, you want time out to think about these things? You're grounded. And we've been grounded for a year. And what I found is that there's a significant difference between sustainability initiatives and interventions. And even before COVID-19, Travel Corporation, which I've had the blessing of working with and with the Tolman family for over a decade, and with Shannon through TreadRight, they imposed interventions to their supply chains before COVID-19, making it very clear when it came to water bottles, carbon emissions, the whole situation. And that was imposed on their supply chains, which was brilliant, because it's basically the beauty, as Randy says, is that if we want business to do it, why? Because they offer scale, a scale which the individual traveler cannot. And what was fascinating was 2 nights ago when Brett was on stage at the WTTC Summit on a sustainability panel. And Shannon, I'm sure you saw this, and it's all online still. So please, I strongly encourage people to watch it. It was fascinating. He was in his zone because everyone's talking about what they're going to do when the world opens up, what they're going to do. And here's Brett just, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this across all of the businesses. And it's almost, he had this great energy about him of, why are you people talking about what you're going to do? Just do it.
Yeah.
And he's always had that. And then he turns to Shannon to just make it happen. I don't know how you do that, Shannon.
Yeah.
But I think that's the point, being that when it comes to sustainability, this is not about initiatives that we weave into our business. These are interventions that we're going to define our business going forward. And exactly as Randy said, this is something travelers are going to be demanding. This is not an additional what it was pre-COVID. I will consider responsible businesses more important. No, this is now an expectation. So it's we as the industry that needs to readjust to the mindset of the travelers and the travel world, or we are going to lose out significantly. But I love what's been done with Trav Corporation and TreadRight, because they've been walking the talk before people even started talking the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. On their website, I love it. It says, we have a plan. So, and Joe, I wanted to ask you with what Anita said, I mean, can you talk a little bit more about why sustainable travelers are so important? Because I know you have some background on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, just even the stat that we saw coming out of the Economic Times and Porter Novelli study from 2020, 79% of consumers are changing their purchase preferences based on social responsibility, inclusiveness, and environmental impact. So we're seeing that, at the broad side of things. At AFAR, we do focus on the modern traveler, conscious, discerning global citizen travelers that really seek out experiences that align with their values. I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is make sure that we're giving them information and inspiration that allows them to make purchase decisions that align with the things that we believe in. And we've been doing a lot of research this year, really trying to understand the mindset, and it's really helped us understand what modern travelers are looking for, how they want to travel, what they want to prioritize, what they expect from businesses and tourism and destinations. These are travelers that we see are about 3 years ahead of the mainstream. So we're able to put our fingers on the pulse of the future by listening to this group of the world's, best travelers. And we're seeing several things. One, they're actively planning travel more than others. They're actively spending more on the travel that they're going to be doing than others. And they're louder, they're more influential. They're influencing their peer groups more than other types of travelers. So this is a mindset, it's an approach. And I think it's one that is going to be extremely important for the industry to listen to. One, because this is a wave that's only going to continue to get bigger and more powerful as younger generations increase their spending power and increase their disposable income. And it's also such an opportunity is, we've lost a lot of great people in travel in the last 15 months. We've seen, flight to other industries because travel is just shut down. We're now at a period, even before COVID, you talk to CEOs at major companies in our industry, and they're scared that they're not going to be able to hire enough people to fill the positions that they need. That's even stronger now. And so in order to be able to attract the right people back to our industry, these are the things they're looking for too. Young, bright, creative minds want purpose-driven businesses that believe in making the world a better place by strengthening the communities where they're working, playing, and living, and taking care of the planet.
Yeah.
So that's so it's on both sides, right? It's attracting the right consumers and the consumers that we want in our destinations, because the more the right travelers that we have in our destinations, the less we're going to hear about the shaming that's happening, or local organizations saying, no, we don't want these people here. No, we don't need a tourism board. All that stuff is just creating havoc for us. So it really is, like Shannon was saying, it's systemic, it's comprehensive, and we need to be thinking about all sides of it there.
Well, and with that, Joe, you're so right. But I wanted to ask you, Shannon, getting very specific, how does a hotel or a tour company like yourself, how do you, when you're planning, let's say, a local experience, how do you make sure that it isn't voyeuristic or contrived, right?
That's a great question. I am also just going to add one thought to what I think Joe just gave a really beautiful business case, and thank you for that. But and you say about all sides, and I would agree. So there's sort of, consumer demand, need to attract quality, young, diverse talent. But let's not forget that there's also the health and sort of happiness, if you will, of a destination. And I think that this is critical. And the business case for sustainability, that's another plastic straw for me. If you ask me to tell you the business case, I won't at this stage of my career. I don't have it in me anymore. You should know it. So I appreciate you doing that, Joe. But also destinations, we also have to think about this as quality control. There's destinations that simply aren't going to be able to take tourists because of wildfires, because of all of the things that are happening in result to our overuse of resources. And I think that when you do, and when you must look at the business case, travel cessation and the avoidance of future travel cessation, either globally or at a destination specific level, also needs to be included in there, because that is, that needs to be a very strong business motivator. So consider sustainability, quality control, if you will, for lack of a better way to put it. I get heated. This is my soapbox, the business case.
Yeah.
It's funny though. I mean, and I hear you on that, Shannon. It's almost, I guess my word is almost frustrating, the amount of times I find myself having to go to that argument, because people just aren't there yet, and you talk to either GMs or owners, and that's not where their head is. And one of our first editors said to us when we were creating AFAR, he goes, Joe, you got to walk people through a front door that they understand and feel comfortable with, and so I haven't figured out, Shannon, the best way to shift that, and that's just something that's, I guess, for all of us, how do we do that?
Yeah,
it's fair. And I'm in a privileged position that I recognize that to my executive, it's not why, it's how. So, perhaps that's just my vantage point, and that I should recognize the privilege of that. But I do appreciate how. And I think that's your question, Annie, how?
Yeah, how do you create experiences? How do you, your plan, you have 11 steps, like you're looking at the offices to the local experiences, like how do you do that? Or what's a takeaway that people listening, like, can do it in their own lives, kind of take what you're doing?
I think there's tons of takeaways. I think where we get caught up is we see sustainability or responsibility or transformative or eco or regenerative or et cetera, call it what you like. And our eyes glaze over. And it's a real shame, because what we don't see are the tactics. And I think if we had a tactics approach as tour operators and travel businesses, this would be much easier. So if we were to understand our impact, understand what's impacting us as a business, and what we can do to positively affect change on that issue, be it food waste, biodiversity loss, carbon emissions. So if we looked at it as a tactical approach, reduce your food waste, employ AI to do such, then it's less terrifying, frankly, even if you just took a little bit of the elephant at the time.
And how do you use AI to tackle food waste?
We use a program called Winnow, currently employed at all of our London-based properties, and it is a pretty cool waste bin, and it measures the trash that you put in. Whomever puts it in uses a little screen to identify exactly what those items are. And then that runs a report so that you can help adjust your ordering. So it's helped us reduce food waste substantially, almost 50% in some cases. And a lot of people don't know that food waste is a massive, massive contributor to climate change. So it's a tactic and it's less terrifying than the word sustainability.
Definitely. Well, Anita,
food waste is the third largest. Food waste is the third largest contributor that you can identify after China and the United States economies.
Wow.
Think about that.
Wow.
Food waste.
Is this not the magic of the conversation? Again, Annie and Joe, thank you for having the conversation. It goes back to what Annie, you and I talked about, and Joe, you and I talked about in the past, it's language. The biggest barrier to sustainability is the word sustainability, because it's firstly, it's very untouchable. Secondly, it's become very judgmental. So exactly to Shannon's point, whether it's sustainable tourism or responsible or transformational or regenerative, it's become a badge and it's become fashionable. It's very much like vegan versus vegetarian versus pescatarian versus non, I eat protein. It's become judgmental. And in doing so, it's pushed people apart rather than brought them together. I mean, when Shannon talks about food waste and going through that process, and I can technically see one of their hotels from where my flat is, that's just good business sense to identify where do you need to order and what do you need to cut back on. So that's just smart. And that's what I think is lovely, that we take the word sustainable and it's not the Messiah. It's just good common sense. And it's the same thing when it was, the issue about over-tourism. It's always about, it's this and this and this. Over-tourism is a consequence of two things. Bad management, absolutely, but also bad manners. What the hell gave a tourist, any of us, the right, just because we have a cell phone, a passport, a credit card, and a ticket, the right to walk into someone else's home without knocking? And that's where the humility we've had in the last year of recognizing the blessing of tourism and the impact of when all these little SMEs shut down, that's where the word community has taken on a new definition. Sustainability has gone into social and economic and spiritual realms that it didn't before. So that's where I always think one of the challenges of sustainability, we really over sophisticate this conversation. This is the stuff our parents taught us. Don't forget your manners, eat everything on your plate and be kind. And somehow we lost that in the process.
I know. It's fascinating how we can't just keep it kind of simple. Even exactly. Like I think about like the last year with COVID, it's like wash your hands, wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from people. Like just do those things, we would be better off. And somehow we like to create drama, and pick apart little things. But it's being able to understand also the totality, the totality of costs and benefits. Like you mentioned about flying, yeah, of course, there is a cost to that. And we have to recognize that cost. And the fact that we still in 2021 have not been able to price in externalities for all the things like emissions and the like, we're not, but we also have to realize that by getting on that plane, we have an opportunity to really make a change or an impact in the place where we're going. So not only measuring the cost, but also understanding the impact so that we can have a conversation about the total, the net. Did that create a net positive benefit? Did we try to minimize the costs, recognizing that we're going to incur them?
Did Harry and Meghan flying the private jet, was the impact bigger? We talked about that, right? That's, I wanted to ask, we had a question come in actually from our editor-in-chief. Would love to hear from the panelists about the potential of public-private partnerships, because we have a number of DMOs listening in. Randy, would you like to open with that, the potential of public-private partnerships to make sustainability more effective and impactful?
Well, often when people talk about public-private partnership, they're talking about some kind of contractual relationship, but I'd like to talk about something that we find very successful when the DMO and the public agency provides incentives for sustainability, dangles a carrot rather than a stick. You know, we talk about the human psychology of reward is better than punishment. Little Costa Rica has had a hotel certification, sustainability certification scheme for quite a while. It's a very sophisticated program. It has 5 tiers. When a hotel goes up a tier on that, they get a 20% discount on international promotions. So to get their little piece of a booth at ITV Berlin or some co-op marketing or whatever. And it's successful. What a cool thing. And it drives behavior. So we advise governments, you know, we're doing a lot of that. And by the way, I have to say some encouraging news is that we're a little underfunded NGO, and we've been busier than ever during the pandemic, because one positive that we've seen is that governments have taken the pause to do more planning and development on sustainability than ever before. So there's some hope in that regard. But that type of program where the public sector is encouraging, providing workshops to the private sector on not just why, but how to operate more sustainably, and then creating some kind of reward mechanism can be very successful.
Well, and Anita, I mean, I wanted to ask you, where are you getting the biggest pushback when you're advising at the country level? You know, when it comes to public-private partnerships or other things?
It's interesting, and it's an important question. And I appreciate your asking it. The biggest pushback I get is when people refer to government and blame government and accuse government. And that's why I keep saying that the one fundamental difference of this crisis compared to anything we've gone through in our generation, aside from the fact that it's completely democratic, it doesn't care about geography, boundaries, age, income, religion, nothing. It's invisible. And so it's hit people at a primal level. And so it's not about a government official. They're human, whether they're leading a country or they're leading a business, everyone is human. And what's been remarkable, and that's why my business has been bursting this year, simply from an advising point of view, everyone has been scared. Mother Nature gave us a huge fright with the first wave. The second, third, and fourth waves, in addition to the fact that the virus is mutating and people don't understand the science, which is a pity, is the fact that it's a lot of it's negligence. Exactly what Joe said. Just keep your hands clean, put your mask on and keep a distance, and we'll be able to get through this. The biggest challenge I'm finding when it comes to government, to your point, and the pushback is when it's looked at for government to solve it. One of the silver linings of this entire crisis has been the fact that everyone recognizes government can't fix this, business can't fix this, everyone has to fix this together. This has been the most cooperative, collaborative, creative time we've ever seen in our careers, where people are coming together to find solutions because the interdependencies are clear. So what I often find is the starting point is people need to get angry, they need to vent, and they'll blame government. But government's human and everyone is doing the best they can. So blow off the steam one needs to, but then please come back and sit around the table again so we can start having the conversations to move us all forward. Because unless everyone gets through this, no one gets through this.
Yes.
I have a little steam I need to blow off on this, because I just saw this news the other day and it was really disappointing to me. And sorry, we were talking a little bit about Canada before Tenny started coming onto the call and being a little bit slow on the vaccination side, but I just saw that Canada just released their budget. And we know that Indigenous tourism in Canada has been a huge focus. It's where the tourism board has put a lot of time and energy. Indigenous tourism, according to according to ITAC, which is the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, and Keith Henry, talked to him, and those communities have been completely devastated by the lack of travel, the lack of dollars coming in. They asked for $60 million to get them back on their feet. And the Canadian government came back and granted them $2.5 million. Like these kinds of things, like where is that disconnect? And that to me it drives me a little nuts when you've got a tourism board that is completely focused on this, spends a lot of time trying to do this, but then you've got a government that for some reason has made a decision to fund a fraction of a percent of what really needs to be done to help get these people back on their feet. And what is that, and how do we think about that?
Joe, yeah, and I'm delighted you've blown off that steam. You've hit something really important, which actually builds on part 2 of the question that Annie asked me. We are not dealing with a travel and tourism crisis here. We are not dealing with an economic crisis. We have a healthcare and a humanitarian crisis. And unless that is dealt with, every single part of the economy, including travel and tourism, is going to suffer. So what you said was so important, Joe, in terms of, they reduced the budget dramatically. Where did the money go to then that wasn't going to go to tourism? Because the government's point of view is, unless they contain the virus, every industry is going to be brought to its knees for the longer. So you're absolutely right. And that's where what governments need to do is be extremely transparent right now in, if we're not giving you this, it's because it's going there. Right at the beginning of this crisis, the UN WTO, we stepped back and said, WHO and ICAO, we're going to stand beside you. You take the lead right now. And when it's safe to open up, then we're going to start pushing the restart of tourism. And we kept the whole Travel Tomorrow initiative going, because it wasn't about tourism between March and June, July last year. This is about healthcare. So you're absolutely right in vocalizing your question. If the money is taken away and it's not explained why, absolutely people should be furious. But when it is explained, we are taking that money away because right now we need vaccines, distribution. We need to take care of the Indigenous people and their health before we take care of their visitation. That you're absolutely right. And that's why the communication needs to be much more open and transparent.
Sounds like they need to call you, Anita.
Yeah. We only have a few minutes, so I wanted to kind of end with 2 questions. I'll kind of go around. Shannon, I'll start with you. What resources do you recommend for people who are curious and want to learn more? And then also, what is one thing that we can do in our own lives today or tomorrow to make a difference?
You can deal with your kitchen in your own lives and compost and gut that with all the plastics that you purchase from your food, and teach your kids about it so that they lecture people in the grocery store aisle like my obnoxious 5-year-old does. That you can do at home and feel really good about it. Great resources. There is a wealth. South Pole is our offset provider. If you're interested in offsets, I would take a look at that. I would take a look at Project Vesta and Green Wave to be very inspired by, new technology. I would look at Tomorrow's Air, another, company that's trying to make carbon capture attainable for the average traveler and small tour operator. I don't know, send me an email. There's a ton of resources out there, and I've got a wonderful team. So if it doesn't work for us, that doesn't mean it doesn't work, and I'd be happy to share.
Thank you so much. Randy, what about you?
Wow. Yeah, I like what Shannon said about, we shouldn't be separating travel and tourism for the rest of our lives. The whole planet's in trouble. We have to, everything we do in our whole, people always ask me, why should tourism be sustainable? I said, because everything we do has to be sustainable. So we have to change the thinking, and we have to take some personal responsibility. I would say to travelers, speak up, ask questions. One of the resistance we get about some people in the travel industry saying, well, there's not a business case. Go back to Shannon's frustration, which I share. Well, quickly on that, there's 2 things they're missing about the lack of business case. Well, there's many things they're missing. They can save money by making energy more efficiency and a whole lot of other things. But again, as I said earlier, the market research shows that more and more people care. They may not act at point of purchase, but it's now becoming a satisfaction level. Satisfaction that the quality of the experience now has sustainability more and more in it. People are now complaining more about when they get there, it's not sustainable. And another thing that's really being missed, anybody under the age of 35 from any culture on this planet is far more concerned. I predict a tremendous tipping point. There's going to be a wave of all those 65-year-old owners of businesses that say, nobody's asking me for it. Well, they don't ask at point of purchase, but they care when they get there increasingly. The market research says that, and everybody under 35 or 40 is tuned into it. So you're going to wake up one morning 7 years from now or 7 months from now, and there's going to be a wave. And I think that travelers have just been too quiet. They should ask, train yourself to ask at point of purchase.
Yeah.
What are you doing on sustainability? Read the fine print, read the labels in the supermarket, like Shannon said, but read the labels on the website of what the travel providers are doing.
The more people ask, the more it changes, right? Like organic food or riced cauliflower, things like that.
Yeah.
Anita, what about?
Ask nicely.
Yeah. Anita, resources and what we can do today.
Resources. I keep it pretty simple for myself. For travel and tourism, UNWTO and WTTC, no question about it. In terms of aviation, ATAG is fantastic because they translate aviation into the benefits, exactly as is being said by Joe at Trade and Travel. In terms of consumer changes in mindset, including in travel and tourism and beyond that, Euromonitor is outstanding. I use them as a primary resource, and the World Economic Forum in terms of country competitiveness. So I try to keep it really simple and use those as my common bases. Those are my main primary resources. And then STR, obviously, for hotel, and Forward Keys for searches. What can we do now? Just be grateful. Wastage happens when we take things for granted. Just be grateful. Whether it's what we do, what we eat, what we wear, how we live, where we go, it's a blessing. It's not a right.
Interesting. And Joe, what about you? And then we'll close this up.
I mean, to answer the second question first, I think it is about empowering ourselves through education, taking the steps to educate ourselves first. I took the GSTC STTP 420 course this past year on sustainability. I thought that was excellent. I recommend people who are curious about it should invest the 4 weeks to do it. That was big. From there, that was a great jumping off point into a lot of different places for me, but other books that I thought were really good in terms of just changing and shifting my paradigm. Donut Economics, incredible book. Anything by Donella Meadows, Limits to Growth, her approach to systems thinking, I think is also great. Schumacher, Small is Beautiful, another one of just helping us understand the mindset that we've been talking about today. We just came out with our next issue of AFAR. We've listed all of our new Vanguard in there. These are people that are using their work to make travel a force for good in the world. A lot of great things with the new Vanguard. Become a member of GSTC. That's an easy way to stay plugged in. It's not expensive. They make it very inclusive, and it's just an easy way to stay plugged in.
And travel to Travel Corporation hotels like Ashford Castle. My favorite.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes. Okay, thank you guys so much. I think I got to 20% of the questions, but really appreciate your time. And Randy, go to bed. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take
Well
care.
done,
Everyone.
Annie. Thank you.
Bye.